Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Sleepless Cinematic Podcast. I'm Julian Barthold.
I'm Madeline Johnson.
My name is Emilio Tostado.
And this is a podcast where the three of us, who all work together at a Midtown Manhattan music school, have decided to start, recording what we would regularly do, which is talk about movies after all our work is done, well into the night, often in lieu of a good night's sleep.
Definitely. In my case, absolutely. And the episode that you're about to hear is falling under the category of what we would call a mise-en-scene, which is just a punny way to describe the fact that this is a movie that the three of us have not seen before and that we've all just recently watched for the very first time.
Yeah, and this was a movie also directed by a filmmaker who we had all seen many of his works prior to watching this movie. So there was kind of that question of, why did we not get to this one?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that might be a trait of future
mise-en-scenes. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Tonight talking about a movie that is, oddly enough, a film that has escaped all of our grasps for a long time.
All three of our grasps.
All three of us.
But finally, we have caught this movie in our hands.
I don't know if I've totally caught it, but
we have attempted more or less to surround our hands.
Yeah, well, we've done it. We've both sat through 2 hours and 28 minutes of a movie called
Inherent Vice.
Fantastic.
Directed by Paul Thomas Anderson. Based on a book written by Thomas Pynchon.
I will say this was the final movie of PTA's that I had not seen. I've seen all the others. Too. Is this true for you guys too?
It is not true for me. I actually have I have a lot of blind spots in PTA. So I've seen this one, I've seen Boogie Nights, I've seen Phantom Thread, and I've seen Licorice Pizza, and that's it. So I've missed quite a few.
That's about half his filmography, I think.
Yeah.
You're in for some good ones.
Yeah, I'm very excited. I enjoy all of the ones that I've seen to varying degrees, but all at least a lot.
Yeah.
PTA has a really interesting arc to his career. And you kind of almost see it unfold when you watch the movies, right? It's like he starts with Heart 8. That's a very quiet movie, but in its own way, it's a very assured movie when you see it. A lot of the camera work is very calculated, and then there's Boogie Nights, which is basically like Goodfellas but about pornography, and it's so snappy and it's got all the tricks and stuff. And then there's like Magnolia, which is visually, it takes on a lot of the traits of a movie like Boogie Nights. And then it really kind of changes direction, I would say, with Punch Drunk Love.
Mm-hmm.
Paul Thomas Anderson is not shy about the fact that he is strongly influenced by Robert Altman. And you can see a lot of Altman through those first four movies. Like Boogie Nights, when I remember seeing that, I kind of thought, you compared it to Goodfellas. I kind of thought of it as like Nashville.
Nashville, for sure. This big ensemble cast.
Yeah, Nashville, but about the porn industry in the 70s and 80s. And then if you've seen the Altman movie Shortcuts, Magnolia feels very much in the same spirit as that.
Yeah.
That's a great pairing of movies. They're both about these like sort of 3 hour long, I like to call them like omnibus movies, where there's like these huge ensembles of characters that don't really seem to have much to do with each other than a few, at first tenuous, but eventually strong connections. And then Punch Drunk Love doesn't feel like an Altman movie at the outset, but the connection I see there is that Robert Altman is known for genre revisionism. And I kind of think of Punch Drunk Love as like a revisionist rom-com or revisionist Adam Sandler movie.
A lot of Adam Sandler movies do take on a rom-com role, right? Like there's always sort of like a female love interest that is there to sort of tame his crazy. And then I would say Sharp Turn takes 5 years to let this one percolate, but There Will Be Blood.
Yeah.
Totally a different feel. I think way quieter
Yeah.
You know, like, but also just super assured movie. Like when you watch it, it's like everything is incredibly intentional. And, you know, I'd say The Master is also very much in that vein of a movie that feels very, extremely intentional in how it's being told. You're not seeing a whole lot of kind of whiz bang camera stuff. The direction is there to service the story and really service the characters and letting the characters let the stories unfold.
I would say though that those two movies, The Master and There Will Be Blood, definitely have a pretty epic sweep in terms of what they portray. There's a certain grandeur to them both. Like, and I think they both have, you know, like fittingly long run times, and there's just this. You feel like you see a great scope of character and human experience in both of those movies.
Which brings us to Inherent Vice.
Yes. And like for me, this was also the last one that I came to as well. I had seen all of his films before Inherent Vice, and I think it eluded me, not because I didn't want to see it. I definitely did, but I think that there was some sense that I felt like I don't quite know how to explain it, but I felt like I was waiting for the right situation to watch it in.
And then we handed it to you on a platter.
Exactly, yeah.
100%.
You knew this moment was coming.
But one thing about the build-up, at least for me seeing it, I don't know about for you two, but even though I waited a while to see it, I had it very strongly recommended to me by a few people. Like it was definitely hyped up, in my case, for a while before I saw it. So it felt kind of like, you know, this is a culmination of a lot of anticipation.
So I have an interesting history with Paul Thomas Anderson because the first movie of his that I ever attempted to watch was Boogie Nights. And I have this odd story about the situation in which I found myself watching Boogie Nights, which is essentially I ended up watching this at age like 15 with 4 boys from my high school who I barely knew. I ended up at the house of this guy that I was not friends with. We were there for essentially like a meeting about our fall musical. Essentially.
Okay. So like business.
Yeah. We come in for business and it's not just us at first. It's like a bunch of kids from our high school chorus. There's probably like 12 or 15 of us meeting about the fall musical during the summer. And I come in and they're already watching it and it's towards the end, but they turn it off. We have our meeting and then most people leave. But I'm getting a ride with a friend of mine who's there, one of the guys. And so then they decide to put the movie back on from the beginning. Other than this one, like kind of friend that I have who's giving me a ride home, I barely know these other guys. I am the only girl there. I am the youngest one there. And I probably watched the first hour of this movie in this situation.
Wow.
Probably not the best.
Yeah.
I think that
also when you're in high school, a movie like Boogie Nights feels very transgressive. And so the boys are probably like, this is awesome.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
I was extremely uncomfortable the whole time. At one point, I think the guy whose house we were at kind of picked up on that. And he turned to me and he was like, Maddie, are your parents picking you up? I don't think I've ever been more embarrassed in my life. Eventually, after, you know, at least the first sex scene that they film, his sex scene with Julianne Moore, at least after that, we're at least this far into the movie when that guy turns to my friend and is like, I think she wants to go home. And
that's actually pretty empathetic.
It was very nice of him. I'm very, very thankful to him for this, even though it was his house and it was his movie suggestion. So,
gotcha.
But he made up for it in the end. I was very sheltered at this age. I was not allowed to watch PG-13 movies until I turned 13. So now at 15, I have only been watching them for a couple of years. And this movie is like hard R. So to me, this was basically porn. Like just to me at 15, I was that sheltered at the time. So I knew nothing about, this was probably 2008, I'm going to say. So I knew nothing about Paul Thomas Anderson at the time. So I think for me, I just had no idea what I was watching and it felt very overwhelming to the point that I wouldn't have even known at that age how to critique a movie like this or even how to enjoy it. So it took me a really long time to revisit this movie after this kind of scarring first experience.
Gotcha.
And I think Paul Thomas Anderson in general, I was reluctant to give him another try just because of starting off in this way.
That's, you know what? I feel like we all have movies like that that we probably saw way too young. I'll just raise my hand and say that mine was 8mm.
I don't
You guys
know
seen
that
8mm?
This one.
Holy cow. Are you guys in for an experience if you ever choose to watch the movie 8mm? I'll just leave it at that.
Like with Paul Thomas Anderson, my first exposure to him actually was also at around age 15. But it was nowhere near as eyebrow raising as that experience that you just described. It was just that I saw The Master with my family when it was in theaters. And I remember liking it, but I didn't really have the mindset to appreciate it yet. There was a lot that went over my head that first time. And then coming back to it years later, I thought it was a masterpiece, fitting with its name. And so that was technically the first movie of his I saw, but I feel like the first thing of his I really saw in earnest was There Will Be Blood a few years later, after I was a more fully fledged film enthusiast and I was in college at the time.
My first one was Punch Drunk Love, actually. And I went to see it not necessarily because I was an Adam Sandler fan. I was definitely open to the Adam Sandler experience-ish, but I was amongst my friends maybe the least enthusiastic about Adam Sandler movies.
I think I also fit into that category.
Yeah, but I had read a review in the Chicago Sun-Times by Roger Ebert. And he was blown away by this movie, that Punch Drunk Love feels a lot like an art house version of an Adam Sandler comedy, but one that has with it a lot of layers and also gets a performance out of him that is way more rooted in the kind of messy interior of the Adam Sandler that makes him, act out and basically be this giant man-child. Yeah. And anyway, so I read this review and I was like, oh, this movie seems like there's more to it. And I convinced my mom to go see this movie, and I was probably about 15 at the time as well. And I remember watching it in theaters. I remember coming out of the theater actually feeling a little bit like, I don't know what I just saw, but in kind of a good way, in a way where I was kind of buzzing a bit. But I loved some of the scenes and some of the way things were shot. And I loved there's like tension in that movie in these places that you would just never expect there to be tension. So anyway, that was my first experience. But then I also saw There Will Be Blood in theaters. And I saw that with a bunch of my friends from the video store that I worked at. And we geeked out so effing hard on that movie.
Going back to the Altman connection, I like that feeling you described after watching Punch Drunk Love of not being quite sure what you saw, but in a good way. I've had that feeling numerous times with Altman movies. And even after I've seen a bunch of them, it still happens. And I think that's actually a great segue back into Inherent Vice, because that's kind of the feeling I had when I was finished watching Inherent Vice. And even like knowing as much about Paul Thomas Anderson as I do going into Inherent Vice, I still felt like that movie struck me in a very unique way. Like I felt like I could definitely see it was his movie, but in some ways, it didn't feel like any of the others.
What I'll say is, we set up a little bit of his filmmaker chronology. So we talked about There Will Be Blood, we talked about The Master, and then we talked about 2 years later, he made this movie. And it seemed to me that this was a little bit of a letting off steam type of project. It felt very much like a movie that didn't have the type of investigative journey into the soul the way that There Will Be Blood and The Master kind of feel like they have. Like there's a real weight to those movies that I didn't feel like this movie necessarily had. That being said, that's how I felt before I saw the movie. There is a lot of intention behind, I'm going to say that word a lot, by the way, but I did feel like there was a lot of intention behind how the film looks and how the story is told. But that if you put a gun to my head and asked me what happened in this movie, I would be dead.
Yeah.
I almost feel like talking about plot is like a fool's errand.
Yeah, I think it's impossible in this film. So I read the book. I decided when we decided to cover this film, I wanted to read the book because I had only read one other Pynchon before, which was The Crying of Lot 49, and I really enjoyed it, but it's his shortest book, I'm pretty sure. It's like 150 pages and it took me like 3 months. So,
Wow.
So I was very nervous. As much as I enjoyed that book, I was like, am I ever going to be able to read another Pynchon? And I decided to pick this one up and I really enjoyed it. And it was a way faster read for me. And it also in some ways is like a little dense, but in like kind of a different way, I think, in that a lot of the book, and I think the movie does this in some ways as well, but a lot of the book kind of tries to put you in his headspace of being kind of high all the time.
I definitely felt like that was something the movie was going for.
Yeah, the movie goes for that some as well, but I'd say like to the point that the narration in the book will essentially present hallucinations of his as things that just are happening.
Interesting.
And so it can be a little bit disorienting.
I felt like I wasn't sure what was going on because in Inherent Vice, there's actually a narrator. And in the book, is it also this female?
No, Sortilege is a character in the book. But in the book, she's just a character like any other. She's just another friend of his from the beach. But in the film, she is the narration from the book. And oftentimes it's word for word, as well as the dialogue. Apparently, PTA's first draft of this is like essentially the book, like word for word. And you can hear that if you're like me, actively reading the book while watching the film.
Sure. By the way, we're going to lean on you a lot today for that.
Then it's like Sortilege is not a narrator in the book. She's just like another friend of his. But then they bring her in as the narrator, played by Joanna Newsom. If somebody had told me that Joanna Newsom was the narrator of this movie, I would have watched it much sooner. I was very excited. I'm actually wearing my Joanna Newsom t-shirt.
Oh, nice.
It's not very obvious, but I got this when I saw her in concert in, I think, 2019.
Very cool. That went right over my head.
Yeah, she is.
But I'm glad you're doing it.
Fantastic live. I highly recommend if you can manage to catch a live show. She's just ethereal and wonderful. And I think that she is very effective as a narrator in this, but it's very, I think, it's different than the book for sure in that way.
Well, one of the things that was a little funny for me about it was that I felt like there was a narrator, but then there was also this second layer of, do I have an unreliable narrator in the Doc character?
Absolutely.
So there's this like weird thing of like this narrator that maybe is like omniscient, but we're also supposed to sort of contend with the visuals that we see from this unreliable narrator. Maybe that is an interesting experiment. I found the first go around watching this movie that was a bit of a hindrance for me.
Yeah.
Feeling confident in what the story that I'm hearing and the story that I'm seeing was, coalescing.
Which, not to make it even more confusing, but I started to rewatch this movie this morning. I did not get a chance to finish it, but I rewatched the first like 50 minutes or so. And I am not totally sure that she even exists as a character. So, and the reason why I'm saying this, I haven't rewatched the whole thing, so this theory may fall apart throughout the rest of my rewatch, but if you remember the scene where she's riding in a car with him and she's talking about like the history of construction in the LA area, and you just like kind of see, it's like a passenger side shot of her just sort of talking about like, this group getting pushed out of this neighborhood to build this thing. It shoots over to a driver's side shot and she's gone.
Oh.
And it seems to be the same neighborhood. Like I backed up a little bit. It seems like they're driving on the same street, but when it shoots to his side, she's no longer there.
Wow.
Interesting. That's cool. I did not catch that.
And the fact that...
And it makes sense though, because now that I think back on it, she's really only ever talks with him.
His inner monologue.
So she's the Tyler Durden of this film.
Yeah. So that's my theory that I'm just going to throw out there.
You guys see True Romance?
No, I haven't seen
That's
that.
the Elvis of the Christian Slater character. Just somebody that they go to for a while to consult.
I was reading the Wikipedia entry about the movie, and it said that Paul Thomas Anderson, in writing the screenplay, that initially it didn't have a narrator per se. And then eventually, I think on the second draft, the Sortilege character became the narrator. So it's just interesting to think about that. It was clearly a very intentional choice on his part. Definitely registers a little strangely. That's definitely a device that until now, like, I liked it, but I was not sure what to make of it.
I also wonder if it was maybe PTA's subtle way of paying homage to the fact that this movie comes from already pre-existing subject matter.
Yeah.
I watched some interview with him that he did with Vice, actually, that I pulled some quotes from because I kind of liked. And he talked about the fact that he just really dug the book.
Yeah.
It was just like a favorite book of his
Yeah.
that he came across, and he's like, man, I just really like this. And so maybe in a way that feels distinct from any other movie he's done before, he wants to kind of pay some homage to the fact that there's like written word that this is all coming from.
Yeah.
And that the narrator is the one to sort of bring that out.
And apparently he had played around with the idea of adapting Pynchon's Vineland instead, which I have not read, but I think he said was just kind of too difficult to pin down into a straightforward narrative. So it's interesting that
he went for this one.
Yeah, this movie, which is also what's the opposite of straightforward, but that kind of narrative.
Yeah, and it's also apparently the only Pynchon novel to be adapted as a movie.
Yeah.
I feel like you don't see a lot of postmodern literature like that adapted into movies. The only other one that springs to my mind is just last year's adaptation of White Noise by Noah Baumbach. Which we could definitely have a conversation about that at some point. I have a lot to say about that movie. But so for Inherent Vice, for one thing, it's very obviously a neo-noir film. Anyone who is well-versed with the genre can immediately tell that kind of from the get-go. But it's within the even smaller category of the stoner-noir. And really the only other movie I can think about that I would even put that name to is The Big Lebowski.
The other one that I would say, which I know you guys haven't seen, is Beach Bum. It definitely leans more stoner, less noir, but I'd say it also, these three have a lot of similarities.
There is a movie that Andrew Garfield was in semi-recently.
Oh, Under the Silver Lake.
That's the other one that I'm wondering if maybe there's some comparison.
I fell asleep watching that.
I haven't seen that. I certainly want to see that, but I haven't seen it yet.
It's not stoner, but it's a little bit more sort of like introvert noir.
And kind of, if I'm correct, is it kind of surreal too?
Yes, totally. Which this movie goes
Ventures.
surrealist a little bit.
Well, it's trying to, as I alluded to the book doing, it's trying to put you in what they call a doper's mindset.
Yeah.
And like there are a few different examples of this where he is possibly hallucinating certain things. When he originally meets with the two FBI agents and they all start picking their noses or scratching their noses. I'm not sure what's happening.
Yeah, they do. They mirror one another quite a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, they start almost saying the same things too at the same time.
That almost feels Lynchian.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
That too, yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember kind of trying to keep an eye out for these because they were some of my favorite parts of the book. So in the film, when he and Coy are at the Board's house, there's like a guy pacing back and forth by the window, kind of keeping an eye on them. And he's really easy to miss because of how he's lit. But they're speaking in front of a window and there's a guy outside that's like kind of walking back and forth watching them. And whether or not he's actually there, keeping an eye on them, that's possible based on the general plot of the film, or it's just to kind of put you in this paranoia of like they are being watched.
I would also say the hallucinations about his girlfriend, Shasta.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like there's some very real possibility that some of those, if not all of those, take on that property of like, is this really happening?
Yeah. In approaching this movie, one of the people who really hyped it up for me is my cousin Sylvie, who is also an avid moviegoer and who is also an avid Paul Thomas Anderson fan. And she said that Inherent Vice is her favorite Paul Thomas Anderson movie. When we talked a little bit about it after the fact, she was saying that the web of associations in the movie between all these sort of criminal associations, the cult that exists, every little thread of it, every tendril of it, it's kind of intentionally not meant to come together coherently. That's how the movie channels, or it creates Doc Sportello's very stoned perspective of things. That, he can pick up on all these things that are connected. You can definitely see that there's some kind of masterful scheme going on, but he doesn't really get to the bottom of it. And maybe he's just too blocked by his own perspective to do that.
Although I would say that towards the end, it kind of feels like he does. Like something unlocks for him. Actually, so that was one of the things I kind of wanted to talk about a little bit. Not to step on your...
No.
Did you have any more to say?
It was not much more than that, but also, if anything else, in that discussion with my cousin, we were also talking about how I haven't read any Pynchon books yet, but she has, and she said that like Pynchon always kind of overloads you with like references and symbolism and all these different things to latch onto. It's very hard as a reader to put them all together and really figure out what it all means, and that is intentionally something that Inherent Vice does too. It throws a lot at you, and it doesn't really show you all. It shows you a lot, but maybe not all of the connective tissue.
Right. Yeah. So there's like a maximalist approach to how much information you're getting. And that was one of the things that I felt was kind of crazy about this movie. I felt like the moment I felt like I was starting to understand something, then there was like a Black Panther
Michael K. Williams.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Who was in there, I thought was really nice in the small moment that he had. But the moment one thing starts to come together, then there is this other complication, and then there's saxophone player.
There's so many moving parts because he's essentially investigating like three different people, I think, have come to him at some point and like hired him to investigate in some capacity. They just happen to overlap in some way.
I had to wonder if some of those people, particularly the Michael K. Williams character, if they maybe were plants by someone
the
deep,
FBI or
or like someone deep within that. I'm forgetting the name right now. The Chris Kyladon, that cult a lot of these people are a part of.
Coy, and then the developer.
Mickey.
Yeah, the one that Mickey Wolfman is associated with. I wondered if Michael K. Williams' character, if he was kind of a plant by them, bait set for Doc Sportello to lure him into this scheme.
That place,
Yeah, and you never really get an answer as to whether he is or isn't, but I thought just that the arrival of him into the story after we already have this kind of setup with Shasta in the moments before, I thought it was a little fishy.
Totally.
Yeah, because I thought it just was a little too perfect.
You were talking about something
about Michael K. Williams.
No, not about Michael K. Williams. Coming back to the point about whether he actually figures it out or not, or whether he's successful as a private detective. There's one scene in this movie that really resonated with me, especially after I watched this interview that Paul Thomas Anderson did with Vice as promotion for the film. Yeah. Which was the scene that Doc has he has a conversation with Liege or Sportalige. Sortilege.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Which he just calls her
Sportello, Sortilege.
He calls her Liege in the book, so if that's easier.
Okay. I'll go with that. I'll go with Liege.
Yeah.
But he has a conversation with her, and it really feels like a turning point in the movie where he goes like, "Man, I feel like my brain is like going to overload."
Yeah.
And she goes, "Distill it. What is nagging you at the end of the night?"
Yeah.
And what he ends up with is the fact that the Coy character, because of his affiliations and his undercover nature, is not allowed to see his family and his daughter. Like that he's been sort of cast off as dead to them. Yeah. And so he says, that doesn't sit well with me. And so the rest of the movie is really about, or he has an incentive to sort of like get to the bottom of this so that he can end up making things right for that character.
Yeah.
And I feel like he kind of does. Like he kind of succeeds at the end of that. Yeah. He gets closer to understanding what Golden Fang, I guess, is really all about. And I talked about the Vice interview as well. Paul Thomas Anderson, when he was asked about the movie and kind of what it's about, he actually used a lot of the same verbiage. Like he talked about, okay, well, when you're making a movie, you want to think about like what's kind of nagging at you, what's keeping you up at night, in order to sort of keep the story going. That scene stuck out to me really strongly in watching the movie. And then hearing it literally word for word spoken by him in an interview talking about the creative process of the movie, I felt was very, very telling. And I don't know what else to make of this. I'm sorry, I just talked for 3 minutes.
No,
and
it's
that was
fine.
all it was.
I think like part of like my initial thought was that he like kind of doesn't solve everything. Is that I think what he realizes, Doc Sportello, is that this criminal organization, this cult, or whatever you're going to call it, Golden Fang and all that it stands for, it's too big to really be completely infiltrated and taken down.
It's beyond his pay grade.
Right. It's beyond his pay grade to really engage with it in all its aspects. But then this whole thing with Coy, who we haven't mentioned yet, is played very, very well by Owen Wilson.
Yeah.
I've never seen him bad in anything.
Yeah.
But
I love Owen Wilson.
This is his only Paul Thomas Anderson appearance, and it's great. But he kind of, he zeroes in on this this situation with Coy and realizes that it seems like he knows what to do to solve that, and he goes all in on that.
But kind of the way that I interpret that, though, is like when he ends up going to Adrian Pruscia's, lair or whatever, that is more of a setup, like by Bigfoot. Like Bigfoot is looking for revenge against whoever killed his partner.
Right.
And after everything that goes down, and when Doc finds Bigfoot outside, he's like, you sent me out. Like, you didn't want to do it yourself. And you sent me in there. And from this point, that's when like Bigfoot plants the heroin in his car. And that's ultimately how he gets Coy out of it. Like he uses this as
he uses
leverage.
that as his leverage. Yeah, totally.
He does,
so it's like, I don't know how much, like throughout the entire film, people are coming to him and like offering him information and like sending him in like, into different situations that further like put him down the path of where he needs to end up. But I don't know how much of it is like because of like conscious decisions and like work that he's putting in.
That's fair. I would say though that scene I think does give him the kind of clarity to know what to do in that moment.
Totally.
Because I think when that happens, he immediately, or when he realizes that the heroin has been put in his car, that he immediately knows what he needs to do to offload it and what the hand he's going to show with the Martin Donovan character in order to bargain it out.
And it comes across that way in the book as well. There are a few more steps going into it to get to the same place, but he does like kind of immediately put this plan together. Like once he has, survived this encounter with the Nazi and with Adrian Prussia and realizes, yes, that Bigfoot set him up. I think at that point he is like fully in control.
Cool.
In this way, that Doc Sportello, he has agency, but a lot of stuff just happens to him and he responds. This is, it's one of many points where you can make the very justifiable comparison to the dude from The Big Lebowski, where he's kind of just a vessel for all that happens around him. And, he definitely makes conscious decisions, but at least initially, I think the dude more than Doc Sportello is someone that things happen to. But then Doc Sportello, being a private detective, he has a little more innate investment in what he's dealing with.
He also, though, both of them get clocked in the head.
Yeah.
Right?
Isn't there like
and basically get more or less set up because of it, right? Yeah.
And then, I think there's more than one scene in Inherent Vice where you have Doc Sportello sitting opposite a desk from some proper policeman.
Right.
But
he also gets rocked by a cop crossing the street.
Yeah.
Like the cop just shoulder checks him.
Yeah.
He was flying.
And that's actually a good point to bring up. I feel like there's a very strong emphasis on institutional power in that movie.
Yeah.
Where you really see Doc Sportello as kind of this, as investigators go, as more of an everyman up against the big system.
Yeah,
the big system of police. Yeah. And that Bigfoot, played by Josh Brolin, is kind of this figure within that system who he has a little more in common with. who's, a renegade in some ways, but still kind of to use Lebowski in terms, abides with the system.
Mm-hmm.
The Bigfoot character is wackadoo.
Yeah,
Totally.
And I can't tell if that's where a lot of the hallucination starts to manifest itself in. But boy, does he have some weird scenes.
Yeah.
Real quick, not to like derail from your thought because I love it, but oh my god, that one scene, and it's very cleverly shot of Josh Brolin just going to town on a chocolate banana. I was laughing so hard to myself because it's also filmed really incredibly.
Yeah.
It has Josh Brolin in the foreground, and he's in focus, but it right behind, literally in the same plane, Joaquin Phoenix, his face and just the disgust that he has on it,
horrified
and weirded out.
And it's a long scene. Like I was rewatching this on the train this morning, and I was like skipping through this scene because I didn't want anyone to look at what I was watching. It goes on for like 2 minutes.
It's hilarious, and it's also really funny because you can tell that Josh Brolin is going for it. Like he even gags on it at one point.
Absolutely.
He's a weird guy.
Well, he's also an actor.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, in the movie.
That's right.
Yeah, in the movie. We see him a little bit.
But I thought that also might have been a hallucination because doesn't he wink at the camera?
I think it's like, I believe that he is an actor.
Okay.
But I do think that, yes, at the beginning, when we first see Josh Brolin's character, he is doing a commercial for Channelview Estates, which is the like housing development that Mickey Wolfman.
So it was him.
Yeah. And then at the end of that scene, that's when Doc is definitely hallucinating by the end of it because he looks dead in the camera and he says, "What's up, Doc?"
Right. Nice.
But I think it's a mixture.
Gotcha. So the fact that he's an actor is actually legit.
Yeah, and that is in the book. It's like, he pays his SAG dues.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, Bigfoot in general. I mean, he's a great sort of foil to Doc Sportello, but he's part foil and part companion. It's a really interesting relationship they have.
I just remembered he has that scene where he calls him up.
Yeah,
and he just drags through. He's like, "Oh, we went to the door and
talking about Shasta."
Yeah,
we looked in the window and we opened the door, and it just like drags on, and she's gone.
Doc's like,
and then he hangs up.
What is it, man?
Exactly.
And when he hangs up, he does that little grin.
Exactly. Yeah.
Little stinker.
It's funny. A lot of this is coming back to me now. He also calls him at one point, and then his wife comes to the phone and totally undresses him.
Yeah.
I can't remember what she gives him a hard time.
Yeah,
about,
I mean, she's essentially like, whoever you are, that is like, you're calling my husband on his day off.
Yeah.
You need to leave him alone.
He's like, well, he called me, but
yeah. And Bigfoot is like, oh, it's Sportello. He's like, oh, Doc Sportello.
Yeah.
And funny enough, you don't see her head in this scene. Her head is cut off. And I noticed that that's the case with a lot of minor characters that we don't see. We only see them neck down.
Or they're introduced that way. I think one of the first one I thought of too when you were saying that was Mickey's wife's boyfriend.
Yeah.
The same thing. You end up seeing his face eventually, but he spends a long time just sort of being this sculpted dude that just walks in and just hangs out. I mean, again, I'm going to go back. I'm going to keep saying this word. Intentional.
Yeah.
There's a lot of intentional stuff going on here. And it is not just some sort of freewheeling movie where the camera just goes wherever.
Yeah.
The other thing that I thought was kind of funny, the cast is pretty stacked actually.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I was not expecting to see the Reese Witherspoon Joaquin Phoenix reunion.
Yeah. Totally.
From Walk the Line.
Walk the Line, and not like that movie holds a very dear place in my heart, but that was a really big movie for both of them.
Yeah.
I haven't seen it,
Reese
actually.
Witherspoon won her Oscar with that movie. Joaquin Phoenix was nominated, I think, for maybe the second or third time at that point.
Yeah.
And so, to see them back on screen also as like lovers that are kind of transactional.
They're mismatched.
But they kind of still, there's like something going on.
They work, yeah. And apparently behind the scenes, like the two of them are just very close and like have like kind of a secret language that they would just like, they have a lot of inside jokes and just like really have a good chemistry between the two of them.
I felt like you could see that play out. That was actually some of my favorite stuff in the movie. Like there's one scene later where she's just like toking up with him.
Totally.
And they're just like hanging out. And it's like when they're not working and they don't have to wear those hats necessarily. Yeah. And she doesn't have to like pull rank on him because, you know, she has to wear a suit to work or whatever. That like there's actually some common ground there.
Yeah. They both know that she's slumming it a little bit.
Sure.
But I think that she does respect him to a certain extent.
Yeah. And that she is kind of, there's a relief that Doc Sportello can find with her that he doesn't find with Bigfoot.
Totally.
That Bigfoot, I mean, it's like there's a companionship between them, but it's more of a challenge.
Yeah. They're like old brother, little brother in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you don't really find out anything in the movie or the book about their history at all. Which is good with me. I like having it open to interpretation.
Yeah, and I think the movie in general, I mean, doesn't do too much to like explain what's before the story that you see. Because I mean, there's certainly, when you think about it, there is quite a bit, not just in their relationship, but in the story at large that could be considered happening before the events that play out. And I think there's still a little more I want to unpack about the role of institutional power in this story, because it feels very much like Doc Sportello. It's kind of just him against everyone else at many points, that everyone else has some kind of involvement with some greater institution. And one of the markers of that I thought was interesting was this ongoing motif about Charles Manson.
Yeah. Right. You're right. That does come up quite a bit.
Yeah, where, I mean, the dichotomy is that Doc Sportello is a hippie. It's 1970.
Yeah, the Manson murders had just happened, 6 months before or whatever.
Yeah,
right.
Everyone's buzzing about this, like, and it really puts emphasis on this in the book, and it does this some in the film as well, where it's like pretty much every time they encounter a cop, they're like, "Are you in a cult?" Like, and the cops are scared by that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, that scene where Martin Short's in the car freaking out.
Yeah,
the dentist or whatever. More Golden Fang connection.
The cop that pulls them over is like, well, anybody that's like in a group of more than 3 and like smoking marijuana are considered a possible cult.
Yeah, and with a certain length of hair too.
Yeah,
right.
Shoulder length or longer hair on men.
Yeah. And I mean, interestingly, I mean, this movie comes out just a few years before Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which also deals, very saliently with that subject matter. And I remember talking to a friend about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood not long after it came out, and that the only mention of the word hippie in that movie was around the Manson cult.
Sure. If I remember correctly with that movie, the Manson family and the kind of hippie nature was sort of tied a little bit to the end of old Hollywood, the beginning of new Hollywood.
Sure, yeah.
And that Inherent Vice is kind of trying to use the Manson murders as an inflection point for the swinging 60s free love and ending and sort of rolling into the 70s, which was marked a lot more by the Vietnam War and all of the opposition, public opposition there was to that.
Yes.
And the government corruption, I guess, that started to take place.
Yeah.
And this movie kind of happening in that kind of 1970 range is sitting there right in the middle, kind of waiting to kind of go, waiting to take the direction more towards the kind of paranoia that might be associated with a lot of marijuana smoking, but pull you towards a direction of like, well, there actually is a lot of corruption going on.
Yeah.
There are a lot of companies that are trying to take money from people. It's like, hold on, this just hit me. The Golden Fang, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like they're involved with heroin, right? But then aren't they also involved with the dentists?
Yeah.
And so there's this weird like cyclical nature to like the heroin making the teeth fall out. And then the teeth, the people have to then go to the dentist. So they get it coming and going.
Yeah, they do. I think they comment on that actually of like, it's in the best interest of the Golden Fang to get people hooked on heroin. And then not just with the dentist thing, but it's also they're involved with Criskyladon. And that is partially in some ways a rehab facility. So you get people hooked on heroin, you put them into rehab at Criskyladon, and then you get their teeth fixed at the dentist.
Yeah.
And it's just, as you're saying, it's cyclical.
Yeah. I mean, for reasons we already mentioned, that this is, a syndicate that is controlling, drug trafficking as well as dentistry. But that and you kind of see that come together in the Coy character, who, I think, he is affected by Golden Fang, Criskyladon in both of those ways, where he is, a former heroin addict who, has been like involved in this whole syndicate. And was it like his wife who, or their child who had like some kind of, like
deformation because of the breast milk.
Yeah, it's not so much deformation as just she was incredibly unhealthy because she is a baby being raised by two heroin addicts, like breastfeeding from a woman who is addicted to heroin.
She seemed okay in the little shot.
Yeah, you see the shot. That I think the implication is that like Hope, the wife, has like turned her life around and
sensible drug use.
Yeah, sensible drug use for children.
But is it
she was great, by the way.
Jenna Malone.
Jenna Malone she was in very short moments. Tapping.
But Joaquin Phoenix's reaction. I think the hardest I laughed in the movie is his reaction when she shows him the photo of young Amethyst as a baby, because I was very curious how they were going to do that in the movie, because it's just described in the book and it's described as being very horrifying, and I'm like, how they can't show that. So well done.
Along with the Bigfoot just slurping down a chocolate covered banana. That was one of the more broad moments of humor in the movie. I also really I think Benicio del Toro is very funny in this, and in his first scene when he's representing Doc against Bigfoot at the police station, and Bigfoot's like, all right, I've decided I'm going to kick him. And Benicio del Toro Sancho is like, you're going to kick him. That's assault. He's like, I think that's a police term. I love the scene that comes before. He's like, he says something like, I think this is a little out of your maritime law jurisdiction. He's like, well, there's a lot of crime that happens on the high seas, officer, or something like that.
And then Bigfoot's like, we can work in pirates if you want.
Exactly.
And lines like these, I mean, yet another Lebowski comparison, that there are like all of these lines in both movies that don't necessarily have much to do with anything else, but are just so good on their own.
They kind of set the milieu of you're supposed to be into the story, but you're also expected or asked to just kind of let it kind of all just soak in. I hear you on that, Julian, in a big way.
Well, you mentioned Benicio del Toro, and I mean, we've alluded to how great this cast is, but really, like, on all levels, it's an impressive cast, and it's also notably a group of actors that you don't really see in other Paul Thomas Anderson movies. I think Joaquin Phoenix, at least to my current recollection, might be the only one who appears in another movie of his.
Does Maya Rudolph not?
Oh, Maya Rudolph too, but she's only in a bit part.
Very briefly, you're right.
But in this and Licorice Pizza, she's only there for a few moments as like a receptionist sort of character.
On the subject of Licorice Pizza, I felt like these movies, it was interesting visually. I felt like they were very similar. You know, apart from the fact that there's like a neon green title cards, I think both movies kind of have that there is this sort of depiction of the 1970s as being a little shaggy. It's not super glorified, but it also it just looks really pretty. Like everything is shot beautifully, I think. I will say.
I think Paul Thomas Anderson, I mean, he's proved really throughout his career that he's great at depicting the 70s. But I mean, I'm with you, especially on Licorice Pizza, because I was fortunate enough to see that movie in 70 millimeter when it came out, and oh my God, it looked amazing.
Visually, that's something you can kind of always count on, especially in this sort of later era of Paul Thomas Anderson, although I'd argue even from the very beginning. His movies all just have a very intentional visual composition to them.
Certainly. And then actually to go back a little more to the point that was being made earlier about the time in which Inherent Vice is set, in like this kind of transitional period. I was thinking a little bit more about like its ancestors in the film world. And have either of you seen The Long Goodbye?
I have not.
Me
I've
either.
been meaning to. That's
Yeah,
one on
same
my
here.
list.
Because that's, I mean, it's an Altman movie. Go figure.
And
But-
filmed in what, 73, 72? So very
Yeah.
similar to the time that's being depicted in Inherent Vice.
Yeah, it's in 1973 that it came out. But also, I mean, the portrayal of Philip Marlowe in that movie, I mean, he's not really a stoner, but he's kind of a slob in a way that you see kind of carry over into Jeff Lebowski and into Doc Sportello. And I think that to the extent that you can trace influence in Inherent Vice, I mean, The Long Goodbye and The Big Lebowski are probably the two movies that stand the tallest. And Philip Marlowe, there's like, you get a sense of a little more maybe jaded reluctance in what he's doing, which, I mean, like for all of the qualities that exist in Doc Sportello, I don't feel like, I mean, he's certainly jaded, but there's something that still feels a little bit, it feels weird to say, but optimistic about him.
He's kind of an
Yeah.
altruistic guy.
Yeah.
There are a couple
Definitely.
moments in the movie where there's somebody who comes in and says, like, oh, I can't really pay you. And he's like, I know you will when you can.
Yeah.
He kind of has that approach in general throughout the movie. He's never shaking people down for money.
Yeah.
And then clearly by the end, you know, he's motivated by the reunion of a father with his daughter.
Yeah.
So there's a very kind of wholesome nature
Yeah.
at his core.
And
You were saying, sorry.
Yeah, I was saying, because you're talking a little bit about money, and there's this huge plot point in the book that they leave out where Doc goes to Vegas.
Oh.
And that's actually where he finds Mickey. Rather than at Crescalidon. And that's where he encounters Puck Beaverton, the Nazi with the swastika tattoo, who's actually like in the book quite a bit more, not just as an antagonist. Like they have some
They
more
flesh him out some
civil
more.
reactions.
Yeah.
Sorry, civil interactions. And while he's there in Vegas, Doc goes. He goes somewhere on the strip, and they're placing bets on what happened to Mickey Wolfman. And Doc places like 1-100 bet that Mickey did not frame his own kidnapping. And then at the end of the book, he gets a check for $10,000. And they're like, well, you know, Mickey was found, and turns out he didn't stage his own kidnapping. And so shockingly, you won all this money. Congrats,
Wow.
Doc.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Nice.
I would like to develop a little more about Puck Beaverton as well. Even though he may be more fully fleshed out in the book, he definitely fits a certain type in Inherent Vice. Like I feel like you see it in other movies as kind of like
He's the heavy.
he's the muscle of the big bad guys. And I mean, you know, he made me think of the nihilists in The Big Lebowski.
I was just
Yeah.
going to say that.
Yeah. And also as a representative of this like nefarious governmental body. Have either of you seen Rian Johnson's first movie, Brick?
I love Brick.
I've
Yeah.
not seen
It's
Brick.
super good.
Brick, that's a great movie,
Yeah.
and highly recommend it.
Nice.
Yeah.
It's been a long time. Actually, Brick was the first movie that I ever saw in New York.
Wow.
I think it was the spring of 06, maybe. But I saw it and I loved it. And I remember thinking that it was just really cool and super weird.
Yeah.
And I was the only one of the group. Everybody else was super disappointed by that
Yeah.
movie. But no, I would agree. A really, really good flick.
Yeah, and that like the Dode character in Brick, you know, without saying too much, he's kind of like positioned as this. I mean, yet again, I'm going to use this word again, the muscle, but he's kind of the one who's like taking and giving all the punches
Yeah.
for this greater, you know, villainous
force,
Yeah.
played by Lucas Haas.
Right.
In
Yeah.
that movie, yes, which is a wonderful bit of casting there.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
And that like the actual source of this villainy, it's not that person's not actually taking the fall, at least at first.
I was going to say really quick, I read that initially, instead of Joaquin Phoenix, Robert Downey Jr.
I saw that.
was attached
Yeah.
to play the Doc Sportello character.
Yeah, I did read that too.
So have any of you guys seen Kiss Kiss Bang Bang
No.
or The Nice Guys?
Nice Guys, yes, I have
Okay,
seen
cool.
that.
No to both.
So those are both movies written and directed by Shane Black. Those are also like neo-noirs that are very aware of the kind of tropes and the tangling of the webs of this person and that person and this person and that person and it all sort of coming together and coming apart and coming together and coming apart with some intentional humor thrown in.
Yeah.
The Shane Black vibe is way more in your face, and there's a lot more like kind of zingers.
Yeah.
But I was thinking a lot about, Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, Robert Downey Jr. He basically is like the Doc Sportello character in that movie. I would have been really curious to see this movie. It would have been so different if it was a Robert Downey Jr. role.
Yeah.
I was wondering, how you guys might have felt if you would have maybe rather seen Robert Downey Jr. in this role.
Well, while we're on the topic of casting, I mean, I think that they said with Robert Downey Jr., they ultimately didn't go with him because of his age. Even though with Joaquin, he is older than Doc in the book, who is 29 in the book. But they cast older in the movie than these characters are implied to be in the book. And so like when I was reading it, I had a much different image than what ends up. I had managed, I was telling you guys this, that I managed to somehow black out who was in this movie. Once I watched it, I was like, oh yeah, it's Joaquin. But I had forgotten that and refused to look it up when I started reading the book because I wanted to kind of create these characters in my own mind. And I think in my mind, I had Doc more of like kind of Caleb Landry Jones.
Interesting.
In my mind.
Okay.
I could definitely see that working for a younger version of the character.
No mutton chops.
No, I don't know that the mutton chops are ever, like, it's funny, I don't
That's
actually
not age
remember,
specific,
but I don't ever actually remember any sort of physical description of Doc at all in the book. At one point he says something about like, I'm almost 30, but you really never get any physical description. The mutton chops, I don't think are referred to. The curling of the hair, that does happen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, there were some interesting, hair choices.
Yeah.
Change your hair, change your life.
I mean, on the topic of casting, I mean, we haven't even mentioned her name yet, but I loved Catherine Waterston as Shasta. And what experiences, like what other things have you two seen her in?
Okay. I'm willing to go here and talk about it.
Okay.
You mentioned it first. I got a longer point about this.
I did not actually love her in this. And
Interesting.
I think for me, it was, the most recent thing that I've seen her in was when I watched Steve Jobs.
Okay.
She's in that. And she plays Steve Jobs' daughter's mother, essentially. So, and she's very good in that and playing kind of a similar character. I actually like her in that. If you can take that character whose name escapes me and put that character into this performance, I would have liked her a lot more. For some reason, I was not totally sold on this. Like, I know that she has supposedly like gone over to the straight side, as they say, but I don't buy her as a hippie chick in this.
When I said like I'm going to go there, it's because of this. So one other thing a quote that I pulled from this interview that Paul Thomas Anderson did with Vice is he admitted that, he basically said, he's like, if he hadn't made it himself, he feels like he would have gotten hung up a lot trying to keep up with the narrative. In cases like this, quote, I usually just give up and I wait for the next pretty girl to show up or the next funny thing to happen or the next chase sequence to take place. Now, I thought a lot about that quote because this movie does not have many chases. It does not have a whole lot of laugh out loud funny moments, although we did hit on a couple.
They're mostly towards the beginning.
Totally.
Yeah.
But I'm going to say this. I hope I don't sound like a creep when I say this. There's a lot of like female energy in this movie that is like
very
definitely sexual.
Overtly sexual.
Yeah.
Shasta and also Jade.
And this is my point about casting. So I also read an interview with Catherine Waterston. And apparently, Paul Thomas Anderson reached out to his casting agent after seeing a movie that she did called The Babysitters. Have you guys heard about this movie?
No.
This is not a good movie. I'm going to tell you right now, it's just not. I think I saw about half of this movie one time. I watched it because I really like John Leguizamo, who plays a character in this movie. And he was terrible in it. The Catherine Waterston character is heavily sexualized in that movie. And she's naked throughout a ton of that movie. And that apparently Paul Thomas Anderson saw that movie, contacted his casting agent, was like, I found the right person for this. And so in hearing that, I was a little bit weirded out because of how sexualized she is in this movie.
Yeah.
And also that quote of him saying, well, I guess I just wait around and I'll wait for the next pretty girl to show up.
Yeah.
I was like, it jumped out really strongly at me. Not to sully anything about this movie or our experience with Paul Thomas Anderson, because I like his stuff. But watching that and hearing that, I was like, in that movie? Okay, then it kind of makes sense.
I think what I liked about Catherine Waterston's performance was that, at least given my experience of what I've seen her in, it felt kind of against type. I think I remember her in Fantastic Beasts being like kind of like a straight shooter, like not exactly wholesome, but kind of like rule following character. And then in Boardwalk Empire, being a little bit more of like, not exactly a rule follower, but kind of like a little bit like a Western character, like someone who is, like straight laced in certain ways, but also like can really, when, up against like a big bad guy, knows what to do. That sort of character, and neither of which really resembled this Inherent Vice character. So I was interested in the kind of the subversion of my expectations of her.
Yeah, like I almost feel like that's part of why we have different readings of this performance, because we're coming in with having seen her in different things. I've also seen the first Fantastic Beasts, and not good. But I had kind of blocked that out. And so the forefront of my mind was this like Steve Jobs character, which I think is in the similar vein as Shasta.
Yeah.
Whereas you're coming from a perspective of her playing more of a straight character and this being against type. So I think that's probably partly why we read her performance a little differently.
Yeah, definitely. I thought, because we mentioned there's that very memorable long take of her that happens maybe 2/3 of the way through the movie. I was just going to say in general, Inherent Vice has a lot of great long takes.
It does.
And I thought that was one aspect of the movie where it felt like it really was trying to get into a stoned perspective. Like there's a great sort of, I think it's like either tracking or a Steadicam shot where Doc is walking into this house party. Makes you think a lot of in Pulp Fiction when Vincent Vega's walking into the diner.
The Jackrabbit Slims.
Yeah, like that was a moment like that too, where it's just this like maybe minute-long unbroken shot that I thought was very well executed. Also, that scene we were discussing earlier where Coy, Owen Wilson's character, is, having a conversation with Doc inside this house.
Yeah, I like that too.
It's actually in that same scene as the initial long take where like the house that Doc is entering is where he has that conversation. And then there's this great sort of swell of Johnny Greenwood's score during that scene, which I thought was an excellent score too.
Some actual guitar in that too, which is kind of fun. Not to say that he doesn't have scores with guitars, but I think it's not normally that overt.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like separated. Like he has what he does with Radiohead or The Smile, and then he has what he does with Paul Thomas Anderson, and usually that's a little more squarely like classically influenced. But to hear like some more of that unorthodox instrumentation there is a great thing. And I mean, I've always liked a Johnny Greenwood score, but this is no exception.
Cool. I'll go ahead and say this. I feel like this movie is about a 6.5 for me.
Oh wow!
I'm gonna go a little low on it. Gonna give myself some room to enjoy this movie potentially later down the line. I don't know, man. Like some of it was just kind of hard to get through. I'm not gonna lie. And maybe that will feel better for me on a rewatch. I really wish this movie was like 40 minutes shorter. This is one that really felt like it felt a little bloated for my taste. That being said, there were a lot of things in it that I totally enjoyed. I felt like this is a fun movie to talk about. Yeah. That like the more we get into it, the more I found myself enjoying it.
I think
that's my take.
In my case, I definitely liked it a little more. I'd rate it more highly. I might put it at like an 8.5 or a 9. But I think I definitely, more so than with any other Paul Thomas Anderson movie I've seen, I know I have to see this at least one more time to really feel like I've solidified my
rated
impression
it properly,
of it. There's often an increase of appreciation on the second viewing, but I think for this that will be especially true for me.
Yeah, so I am gonna go with an 8 personally, but I feel like that it has increased up to that point after having started a rewatch, which I've not finished. And I really enjoyed this book, and I really recommend the book. And whether or not you enjoy the movie, I think the book is a really enjoyable read.
Is there anything else you want to share about the connection between the book and the movie?
I was trying to think about, I mean, it drags out a little bit more at the end, but I don't know that there's that much. I mean, essentially they go on, chase scene feels like the wrong word, but they, Doc and Sancho, the lawyer Benicio del Toro, they actually kind of go out into the sea after the Golden Fang boat, and it ends up getting not destroyed necessarily, but there's something happening. It's very vague about what exactly is happening to this boat in the water, but Benicio del Toro has this, Sancho has this plan to somehow take ownership of the Golden Fang boat based on his knowledge of marine law. Because
I was waiting for that to play out more actually in the movie.
If this boat crashes and washes up on the shore and nobody claims it within a year and a day, then he's like filed to claim ownership over it or something. And he's like obsessed with this boat.
Yeah, he's looking for that legal loophole.
Exactly.
Cool.
That's really the thing that they add on to the end, is this like C-word chase scene of the boat. Puck in the book is implied to be gay also, which is like an interesting, I think, addition. It gets into a little bit of his backstory in prison. He essentially like meets this companion who they continue their relationship outside in the real world. And he also has a relationship with a woman who he later puts into the hospital. Like, he's still a piece of shit.
Yeah.
But you get this you get this interim where that woman comes to Doc after having kind of dated a little bit. She goes to Doc and she's like, I want to find him. Can you help me find him? And they go out to Vegas in search of him. And then she and Puck like get married.
Oh no. Okay.
Which
That's a
is
bummer.
Bad.
Yeah, for so many reasons.
Ends up very bad later. So that was another kind of detail, is that they had this whole thing in Vegas that they kind of cut out of the movie, but I understand why they did that. I don't know that it adds that much, other than Doc doesn't get his like 10 grand in the mail in the movie.
Right.
I ended up not finishing the book before watching the movie just because of timing throughout the week. I've since finished it, but I was around the point where Shasta comes back. That scene that we're talking about is around the point I was in the book when I watched the movie. And then I went back and finished the book, and have since started rewatching the movie. And I think that it holds up really, really well to a rewatch.
Gotcha.
Once, as Julian, you were kind of alluding to, once the foundation has been laid and you like have a basic knowledge of what's happening, I think you can enjoy the ride a little bit more without feeling as disoriented. I had one thing that I really wanted, that I talked a little bit about earlier, was I wanted the movie to go further with, kind of putting you in the like playing into his hallucinations, the doper state, and like just kind of making the environment like feel like the environment of someone who's stoned all the time. I wanted a little bit more from that in the movie. That's, I think, for me, what brought it down a little bit, is because I think there was so much potential to like really go there.
And it was such a hallmark of the book, and how the story is told in the book.
And I think that there's a dichotomy of, there are some scenes where maybe it's not so much in the filmmaking that happens, but in Joaquin Phoenix's acting, you can see it. Or, sometimes it's the other way around, where he's, what he's doing is fairly straight ahead, and then, something about the filmmaking makes it feel more like this hallucinatory experience. Yeah.
You also get a lot more music in the book, which is it's interesting to like, have this film, the score done by Johnny Greenwood, and like having John and Newsom in the cast, and the film talks a lot more about Coy's career.
I was curious about that too,
as a surf saxophonist.
I love that detail, that he was considered better because he improvised a little bit.
He
didn't just play the same melody for the second and third choruses. I kind of like that.
Like details like that are, part of what make this an appealing watch. And one thing that I would like to talk about before we wrap this up that we haven't mentioned at all yet, the title. where it is defined in the movie, and is it defined in the book too?
It's defined in the movie. It's defined in the book. I think at the point I watched the movie, it hadn't yet been defined in the book, and I was like, I have no idea what they're talking about.
Yeah. Where it's, and it's defined as kind of like this maritime lingo, referring to, like I couldn't state it quite in the way that it's stated in the movie, but of things that kind of just
assumed casualties
of a ship riding experience, things that maybe in the context of the greater story that refers to like this, criminal conspiracy that we all know exists but can't fully be dismantled, or maybe it refers to the drug-fueled experience of Doc Sportello, that there is just, it's so intrinsically like wound up in his experience of his reality. Maybe that's what it refers to as well.
I like that. I like that read.
Yeah.
Thanks. I've thought too, just because now for me this completes my experience of Paul Thomas Anderson features. I've seen them all at this point. I've thought maybe of watching them all chronologically at some point, and I wonder if that will affect my later readings of Inherent Vice too.
It very well could.
Yeah.
It was funny because in the lead up for this, I wanted to check the Magnolia box.
Mm-hmm.
So I finally got around to seeing that, which I did feel like watching it now, I had way more of a view from 30,000 feet on what that movie's feel and tone and how it was filmed fits into his greater filmography.
Yeah.
And that it sort of feels like the fever pitch of a style, of stylistic decisions that are like the camera and the movement and like the whip pans and the split screens and the cross cutting. And that from that point on, all of that stuff starts to become less and less important as part of his cinematic language. And so I don't know, maybe when you go through that, you can tell me whether or not I'm crazy or not.
Yeah, I guess I'm just interested to see if, because Inherent Vice was released between The Master and Phantom Thread, if sandwiched between those movies in order, if it feels like there's more of a connective tissue with them. One other thing actually on that point that my cousin said about Inherent Vice in relation to other movies was with The Master specifically, that both of those have a sense of the protagonist's perspective affecting the movie maybe more than other Paul Thomas Anderson movies, that is kind of the logic of it, that there's things that kind of just happen without, easy explanations other than that it's in that main character's subjectivity. That, like maybe, upon rewatch, I'll see that too. That's more true in those two movies than anything else Paul Thomas Anderson has done.
Cool. Well, Madeline, start filling in the gaps.
Yeah, I am really looking forward to filling in some of these gaps. I think probably I'll start with Punch Drunk Love. That's one that I've just been really wanting to watch. But yeah, I plan on watching through all of them relatively soon. I think this movie and recently finally rewatching Boogie Nights really finally got me started, got the motor going. So I think I have some momentum now to knock the rest of these out.
Wonderful. Well,
yeah.
I think we did it. We watched this movie and we tried to have the best conversation we could about it.
Yeah. Maybe upon rewatch we'll have an even new perspective to bring to it.
This seems like a good one to ruminate on.
Yeah.
For sure. Awesome, guys.
Beware the Golden Fang.